Well, all right, Matthew Fairburn. It's been a little bit of time since you and I last spoke. And here we are, 7 games into the season. Tuesday evening on October 24th, the Sabres are coming off a 6-4 victory, a road victory, big road win for the Sabres at Ottawa. It's been a fun little journey already through 7 games, but just to briefly recap this Sabres-Senators game that you and I just watched in separate rooms, separate houses, by the way. We didn't watch it together. It kind of felt like old times when it came to offense, didn't it, Matthew? Tage Thompson with 2 goals and an assist. Jeff Skinner with a pair of goals. He's been pretty hot. I think we'll talk about that. Alex Tuch showed up tonight in Ottawa. A goal and an assist, plus a scrap. Looks like he's going to be wearing that one for a little bit. And Zemgus Girgenson's also getting on the board. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen tonight, Matthew, making his first appearance of the season, stopping 34 shots for the win. And last game on Monday, so the Sabres just played a back-to-back. Monday night, a 3-1 loss to Montreal. After the game, it was pretty clear that Don Granato wanted this team to get pucks to the net, get bodies to the net. And voila. I think they did just that tonight and picked up 5 goals for the first 2 periods, added a little cherry on top with a Tage Thompson moonshot in the final minute of play. And I think they listened to their coach, Matthew. Where are you sitting at with this team after tonight's game?
Yeah, exactly what you said there. Bodies to the net being the key, right? They've been getting pucks to the net in a sense, but they had, 67, 69 shot attempts, something like that against the Canadians, and 8 high danger chances. Not a good ratio there, throwing a lot of stuff from the perimeter, not having a lot of traffic in front, not willing to, as Don Granato put it, get to the net with enough conviction and determination. Here we are 24 hours later, and you run down that list of goals, right? And you tell me that Tage Thompson had 2 goals. You say that Alex Tuch had a goal and an assist. Skinner gets a couple goals. And in my head, right, if I hadn't watched this game, I'd be running through the highlight reel, right? I'd be thinking, man, what did Tage do to get those 2 goals, or how did Skinner get those goals? First goal was nice, right? 2-on-1, no look pass from Alex Tuch, and Jeff Skinner finishes. A lot of greasy ones otherwise, right? Jeff Skinner banks one in off a goalie on a play down low. Alex Tuch gets a deflection. Zemgus Girgensons gets a deflection. Tage Thompson gets a deflection. And then Tage Thompson gets the empty netter. Those are not, this is frozen frenzy night, Kris. I'm not sure if you've heard. All the teams are playing. John Buccigross is doing his NFL Red Zone style show. I don't know that these were highlight reel goals for the frozen frenzy, but they are exactly what the Sabres needed to get themselves out of their head and just get through this offensive funk that's kind of been hanging over this team for the first 6 games of the year.
Frozen frenzy. Yeah, I could do without that term, I think. I don't know how I feel about that. But no, it was cool, I guess, to have everybody going on one night. But, it was funny. I thought the Sabres had it in the bag tonight, and I was actually dozing off a little bit in the third period. It's been a long day. And then all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose in the last couple of minutes. I was like, yeah, we got a hockey game. It was a frozen frenzy there in the last couple of minutes. Alex Tuch, there's been a lot of chatter this week, I think, about Tuch, and even going back to preseason, missed some time in preseason. There was one game, right, where he was going to suit up and didn't make the final roster for that game, and looked like maybe he was kind of battling something. I don't know where you're at with Tuch, but now had the fight over the weekend on Saturday, had another scrap tonight, finally got on the score sheet tonight with a goal. And I just found his game tonight, to be, I don't know, do you think that was his best game in the season, Matthew? I guess I'll ask you that question.
I'd say by far, actually, it was probably his best game of the season. He made reference afterwards, about feeling like he had let his teammates down, let Sabres fans down with how he'd been playing. And like you mentioned the injury, and Don Granato kind of brushed that aside last night, said it's more so that he needs to find his game. And so I feel like there's always, you're reading between the lines with NHL injuries, and you do really have to pay close attention to little things like that, right? Like a late scratch from a preseason game. Just keep it in the back of your head and try to contextualize how these guys are playing. Also recognizing a 6-game slow start is not, the end of the world, but on multiple different lines against multiple styles of opponents, he was just kind of a non-factor. Coming into this game at 5-on-5, he had 4 shots on net, 16th on the team. Matthias Samuelsson and Eric Johnson had more shots on net at 5-on-5 coming into this game. So any way you spin it, he just was really not a factor for the Sabres until tonight. And he did have that fight over the weekend, like you mentioned. He was trying to get involved in other ways. I never would for a second accuse Alex Tuch of coasting or not caring. Like that, this was not that. This was a guy just trying to get in rhythm to start the season who didn't have a lot of preseason time. So this was the type of game that I think, gets him feeling the flow of an NHL season. To have that assist, you could tell he was feeling the offensive part of the game, gets to the net to get that tip-in goal on the power play, and the fight. Another fight. This one, I don't think he wanted quite as bad as he wanted the first one earlier in the season.
He didn't want it as bad as Brady Tkachuk wanted it.
He did not want it as bad as Brady Tkachuk. He was a willing participant, and he handled himself fairly well, but this was not one that he was going looking for. But Brady Tkachuk very much was, and Tuch willing to answer the bell. I said before the season when I was making predictions, I thought Connor Clifton was going to lead this team in fights, but Alex Tuch is coming out of the gate strong in that department.
It's funny. So, that was a meatball question. I mean, this was Alex Tuch's best game by far this year. Just thought I'd test you a little bit here. It's been a while since we've talked. And, I guess tonight, just looking at, you and I had talked in the final preseason game. We mentioned that the Sabres were going to have this run of games on home ice where they didn't exactly perform exceptionally well last year, and just kind of, dealt with pressure, putting on a show for the home ice crowd. And, tonight was a game. They go on the road, and after having some woes at home early in the season, so they get away, they get on the road, but it was also a night where the lines were kind of put into a blender a little bit, right? And what do you think was the bigger factor? The line changes, or just getting out of Buffalo and getting on the road and getting away? Because it's a tough question. It might be impossible to answer. I think that they were going to do the things that they needed to do and listen to their coach and take the feedback after last night's loss to Montreal. They were going to do that regardless of what lines they were on. I thought they know as hockey players to go, to the net. But what's your take on that whole thing? What was a bigger factor to you tonight? Because this was, almost, considering what we've seen. I mean, through the first 6 games, the team had 13 total goals scored, and then they score 6 tonight. Was it the line changes, or was it just getting away? What do you think?
Getting away feels like the bigger factor, because they've shuffled the lines, right? They've tried different things. They've had guys in and out of the lineup, and sometimes it's worked, sometimes it hasn't. And it felt like, I would say 2 things. Getting away helps. This team is better on the road right now for a variety of factors that are hard to pinpoint, but they do like to get away. And I think that seemed to matter. And it also seemed like the opponent locked them in, right? Like they have an awareness, maybe sometimes too much of an awareness of, even though you talk about blocking out the outside noise and all these different things, they have almost too much of an awareness of perception sometimes. And they know that Ottawa is the other team. Ottawa and Detroit are these other teams on the rise in the division that they're going to be battling with. And they also just know it from the games they played against this team last year. They are, like most NHL locker rooms, they're hockey fans as well, right? So they're looking around, seeing the moves that Ottawa makes and seeing what people are saying about everyone around the league. So I think that, along with being on the road in a hostile environment, they feed off of that, which is a good sign. if it also wasn't paired with how bad they're playing at home, over the last season and then bleeding in a little bit to this season. So I think it was a nice reset for them and probably good. Oddly, it seemed like the back-to-back played to their advantage, which is rare. You'd think early in the game they looked sluggish. They looked like they were on their heels, and the back-to-back might cost them. But it allowed them to just really simplify what happened against Montreal, boil it down to one simple talking point of put bodies to the net and be willing to get to ugly areas. And then you just turn the page, move on, and play against a division opponent that you don't really like. That's helpful. And so the lines, I think, will juggle a lot this year because they have some roster questions that we'll get into, and they have a group that, guys can play with different, line mates and guys can move around. So that's going to be a tool that Don Granato has all the time to play games and get different things out of people. But the big factor tonight felt like being in that building against that team and being able to just turn the page quickly and kind of, band together a little bit as a group.
Banding together as a group, getting on the road against that team with a goaltender, making his first start of the season. And, I think that opinions varied on how UPL looked in preseason. I thought he had a couple, goals that you always wanted back, but overall, I think he got a bad rap from fans when actually I think he had some pretty good showings in preseason. If you look at his whole body of work and from a save by save perspective. And UPL, I look at him tonight. There was a scrambling moment there really early in the game, like the 5th minute. There's a play on the side of that, and I was like, oh, man, I got a little nervous right away. But I thought overall, he settled in. He was aggressive. He looked confident, and he had a really solid performance tonight. So, you have this goaltending situation now. It's kind of come full circle, right? We've seen all 3 of them now. And Sabres have a game coming up on Friday in New Jersey, I believe, right? And where are you at with the Sabres goaltending? Well, I guess we'll start with UPL first. What did you think of UPL tonight? No, maybe we can kind of dovetail in. What does his performance tonight mean for the goaltending picture currently through 7 games now that we've seen all 3 guys play?
I thought he was really solid, and in the final few minutes of the game got pretty hairy there, and I don't think that was on UPL, but it did.
No.
It made things look a little worse when you look at the final stat line, but that was really not on him. So I thought the confidence was the big factor. He almost didn't feel that way when we were talking after the Heritage Classic there, the game against the Leafs in the preseason. There was a lack of that, of confidence in what he was seeing or conviction in his movements and his reads and everything else. And that's a trait that pops up with him. So it was a little bit concerning. And I didn't see that tonight. He felt sharp pretty early. Like you said, there was a little bit of a scrambling moment early on. He gets that save. I think there was, 16 and change left where he kind of a point blank opportunity between the circles and made himself big and made the save. And it felt like, okay, he was feeling the game a little bit at that point and made some nice saves. And it feels like this performance, just like Comrie's 2 games, and really just like Devin Levi's 4 games, they don't give you the answers, right? They don't get.
No.
Here we are 7 games in, and I can't sit here and tell you, which guy gives them the best chance to win on Friday
Well,
night.
I think that's why they kept 3,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and still have 3, and it's likely why they're going to probably play in some roster games and do some voodoo to keep 3, I think, as long as possible until one guy, stands out. I think that when we came out of preseason and, even going back to the end of last season, we all thought maybe they had the answer with Devin Levi, and we've seen Devin Levi now at the beginning of the season deal with some struggles. I would say, I think it's safe to say, and I don't know what's he dealing with right now. You're down there. What are you hearing on Levi right now, health wise?
So it's lower body, but
Okay.
it's interesting because that Flames game, he didn't look great. I thought that was his worst game of the season so far, and didn't look as quick, didn't look as, so when he popped up with the lower body, it made some sense. It's like something's nagging at him and they're giving him some time. He was on the ice. He didn't practice on Friday, the day after the Flames game. Then he was on the ice Saturday for the morning skate, which was an optional. And then he hasn't been on the ice since. And so I think there's a combination of things, right? There's something there that, whether it was overworked or whatever, something happened, something popped up. Nothing crazy, nothing major whatsoever, but pretty good timing, right? After that game he had against the Flames, you let him sit back. This is the concern I had with Devin Levi going back to the end of last season. I remember asking Kevin Adams at the end of season press conference, because there was a lot of Levi talk, a lot of Levi excitement. And basically since I took this job, the summer of 2022, I was really enjoying following Devin Levi and his progress and his story and everything about it. So I'm extremely high on Devin Levi long term. I will preface this with that. But my question to Kevin Adams was something along the lines of, going into a summer where you could make a move at goalie, and you're not really going to know if Devin Levi is ready until October, maybe November, when you see him, right? And at that point, you can't go backwards and sign somebody in the summer. So how do you kind of figure that out? But Kevin Adams, throughout the summer, had conviction, and Don Granato throughout training camp had conviction that Devin Levi was equipped to handle this, talent-wise, ability-wise, and mentally. That he was ready to handle this. Not a lot of goalies do this, as you know. Like, almost none go right from college to the NHL. So my main concern was, in a year where it's no longer about development for the Sabres, Devin Levi almost doesn't get a chance at a development year. And so right now, it feels like they might get a little bit of that because of this injury, minor as it may be. He gets to step back and take a breath now for over a week. By the time, even if he were to play on Friday, that would be over a week. And that's what he's used to in college, right? A little bit of a gap between games and not playing every other night. You would have hoped it also gave them a chance to get both of those guys into the net, Eric Comrie and Ukko Pekka-Luukkonen, get a look at both of those guys. I don't think they left these 3 games thinking, and I could ask you, after these 3 games, do you feel like one of Comrie or Luukkonen solidified himself as the clear-cut backup?
No, not
really. You could still
really.
make a case for either one. It's,
No, I think you're going game to game right now, right? I mean, yeah. So no, to answer your question point blank, no, I don't think that there's an answer to that question just yet.
So now you're sitting there and you're saying, what do you do next? Do you go back to Levi when he's healthy, or they now have the option to retroactive IR Devin Levi because he's missed a week, and then you get a roster spot? The only thing about that is that sort of helps you, but what are you going to do with that roster spot? Matt Savoy's on a conditioning stint, so he's not going to come up and take that spot. Is there somebody that you're clamoring to get into that spot that you really need? Probably not. Maybe Rusek if you wanted to give Okposo a breather, but now he's going to have a few days. So it seems like there'd be a decent chance that Levi's back in the net on Friday night against New Jersey, as long as he's healthy and feeling good. But they've now created just an interesting situation where you're trying to find the hot hand where one does not necessarily exist right now in net, and you're kind of proving, like you said, why you kept 3 goalies in the first place, because you want some combo to emerge for yourself, and they're still waiting for that to happen. And I will say, while they're waiting for it to happen, they've gotten solid goaltending, I think, through goaltending has not been their biggest issue through 7 games. So it's still a murky picture is what it comes down to. It looked like it was Devin Levi's net, and then he gets a little banged up and he didn't play great. And now it's still, I think, Devin Levi's net to lose, but there's a balancing act happening here between his development, his health, what's best for the team, and trying to keep those other guys in something of a rhythm so that they can be ready when called upon.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough game in Jersey. You know, my initial instinct was, and this is what I was just typing. I was looking for a stat here. New Jersey's a wagon, right? Very offensive team, a lot of firepower. You know, my initial instinct is play a guy right now until he loses. And you know, if Levi's not ready, I think it's kind of for me, I'd almost throw Luukkonen back out there. And I was just trying to see, did Luukkonen get a start last year against Jersey? It looks like he got a 5-4 win at home against New Jersey late in the year on March 24th. Let in 4 goals, 27 saves on 31 shots. I don't have Comrie up here, but we'd have to go back, I guess, and take a look at that.
I want to say Levi got one in the game. They were technically eliminated, right?
Yeah, and then Craig Anderson probably played some of those others. I'd have to look. I'll bring up Comrie. You know, that's kind of my instinct, though, is if you don't, you know, have the ability to ride a quote unquote hot hand, well, I guess the hottest hand you have is a guy that just won a game for you. That's kind of where I'm at. I mean, it wasn't a bad performance by any means tonight, to your point. You know, I mean, you know, he let in 4, but I'm not really hanging those on him. You know, cross crease pass, like those goals in the third period, especially power play goals. And, you know, he almost stopped that one. It went off his glove before it went in the net. I think it was maybe the Norris goal. But I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at, but it's going to be really interesting. I think this is why they kept 3, to my earlier comment. I think just when we thought we knew something, we find out that we didn't know anything, you know, and we're just kind of back to here we are again with the goaltender. So
because it looked out of the gate like, man, they're going to ride Levi until the wheels fall off here. And then the wheel didn't fall off, but it got a little, you know, it needed some WD-40. So, you know, he gets put on the shelf here for a little bit. But I think just my biggest concern, big picture in net, actually isn't even that the 3 of these guys aren't good enough. It's more so what I mentioned about Devin Levi not getting that. If this were a year ago, it actually would have been perfect for Devin Levi, right? Like no pressure necessarily. There would have been enough pressure, but not the same type of pressure. Mm-hmm. Craig Anderson would have been here. You know, he gets to be, you know, play some games and have these development moments with other guys on the roster. Well, now a lot of those guys have had those moments. They've had that time. And Don Granato has said this is not a development year. But the fact of the matter is that it is a development year for Devin Levi. And so it felt like coming out of the gate, they were trying to speed that up, get him a bunch of games and, you know, get him used to what it feels like to, you know, have to play frequently. It's just going to be a balancing act all season long between his development long term, making sure that he is, and I don't want to discount his ability to do it, because mentally and emotionally and like maturity wise, he seems like a guy that will be able to handle it. It's just the historical context is that a lot of goalies, you know, Brian Cummings, you know, mentioned in the chat here, Ryan Miller needed 170 AHL games after a long college career. Connor Hellebuck played in the AHL after a long college, you know, career. Go down the list of guys that played in the AHL. And just because it's done one way doesn't mean it always needs to be done one way. There's other guys. Swayman barely played in the AHL, but he had a different role that he was stepping into. Spencer Knight didn't play much in the AHL. You see a lot of Russians kind of skip the AHL, but they're playing, you know.
They're playing in the K.
Yeah. They're playing in the K. Henrik Lundqvist skipped the AHL, but was playing top tier professionally in Sweden. So going from college without the AHL is not super common. I think Swayman is really the closest comp. And so it's one of those things where I'm just wondering, how it will all play out for him. You don't want it to mess with him too much beyond this season, because he does deserve that time to develop. And I know he got a couple years at Northeastern, but just thinking about the big picture with Levi, it's going to be in the back of my head all season long.
Yeah, you start to wonder, if he was overworked to start the year, and maybe they were a little overzealous. Hindsight's 2020, but needless to say, I look forward to finding out what the answers are in net. Hopefully, probably not the next time that we get together and do a podcast, but maybe in the next 2 or 3. Maybe we'll start to have some answers, Matthew, on the goaltending. I want to shift gears to another topic that we talked a lot about, you and I, in the preseason. We saw Matthew Savoy go down for a conditioning stint in Rochester, but I think, who is still up here in Buffalo, Zack Benson. Zack Benson returned to the lineup tonight. Didn't hit the 10-minute mark, I believe. I think he came up a little short of 10 minutes. And want to kind of, 7 games in, right? Another temperature check. We just talked about goaltending 7 games in. We talked about Tuch 7 games in. What's the temperature check look like for you on Zack Benson with the whole body of work, including tonight and his return to the lineup?
If you had asked me heading into the Calgary game, I felt as bullish as ever that he should stick around. I still think he should stick around. I've maybe cooled slightly and seen, the potential, pitfalls that could exist for him just holding up over the course of a season. Calgary was not his best game, but he comes up with a nagging injury as well. They give him a chance to sit. And I thought tonight he was playing pretty well. And he didn't see the ice much in the fourth or in the third period once they were up by 4. They really kind of went from 4 lines to 3, it felt like. And that was, it's tough when you're up 4 goals. You kind of think that's a good chance to roll 4 lines and keep doing what you're doing. But,
for where this team is, that we all understand, I think, why they did what they did.
Sure.
They needed to get the win. But yeah, to your point, that is a time when the fourth line is usually excited because they're like, wow, we're going to play.
Yeah. And so,
and they're not the fourth line, by the way.
He ends up just under, 10 minutes, like you said. And it's starting to see some of the writing on the wall in terms of, okay, they're stretching out these 9 games, which means they're kind of, and then they're limiting some ice time. So maybe they're seeing some things that suggest they, wonder if maybe junior or even stretching him out closer to World Juniors is a better path. A lot of the dominoes that we talked a little bit about when we were theorizing what could happen in the preseason, we're seeing some of those, right? Because Benson came out of the gates great, maybe cooled off a little bit, that's fine. That's to be expected. I don't think he
should be expected. I'm glad you said that. That's exactly what we should expect.
I also don't think he's bottomed out. And it's part of what we talk about with Zack Benson that we both really like about his game is that he impacts the game in a lot of different ways away from the puck. And so that if he's not on the score sheet or if he's not super active in the offensive zone, there's other ways that he's making plays. And I still see that from him. I don't see a kid that's lost out there, that because he's playing all these games, he's losing, mental focus or he's getting pushed around too much. I really don't see a lot of that, but it's to be expected that there's going to be some ups and downs when you're that age playing at this level. And it's not by any means a bad thing if he goes back to junior. The only thing that from the start has kept me hesitant about that is forward depth, I think, is a problem for this team right now in some ways. And losing him doesn't make it better, because the whole reason he was on this team is because he gives them a chance to win, because he's helping them win and because he's contributing. And so you're already looking for answers a little bit in the bottom 6. And, maybe an 18-year-old shouldn't be an answer in the bottom 6. Maybe that's fair, that his style of game, might not. I mean, I think it fits, but I understand if maybe over the course of a season, him wearing down is a cause for concern. But there's a lot of questions in terms of how they fill in their forward lineup. And he's not been their worst forward, that's for sure, through these games. So how Savoy looks in the AHL, I think, will matter. How Benson handles, these next few games before the decision has to be made will matter. You've got Yuri Kulik, just off to a amazing start in the AHL, which maybe tempts them, but a lot of that seems to be happening on the power play. You're watching Rochester a lot closer than I am, but you have Rusek down there if you wanted to call him up. So I don't know, a lot of stuff floating around the brain here on Benson, but I still feel like he's helping them.
I don't think he's played himself out of any job right now. I think that they have the opportunity to stretch it out. To your point, we've seen young players come into the league. They get a lot of, they'll play a few games, they'll go up in the press box and watch for a few games. It's almost like classroom style work for them when they're watching from up top, and they can continue to do that and prolong his stay here. I think the immediate goal for Benson is kind of what the immediate goal was for Savoy coming into the year. Keep him here through Thanksgiving, get him into December. And if you can send him to the World Juniors, that would be right around December 9th, December 10th, assuming, well, maybe Hockey Canada, by the way, gets together earlier because they didn't have a summer camp this year. If that's the case, maybe even better for the Sabres. But yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be peaks and valleys. We talked about when's the bag going to pop, and he just kept kind of adding air to that bag and getting people excited. But, having his ice time a little guarded tonight, late in the game, wasn't a bad thing. Yeah, I think that, but he didn't look like a guy that, needed to kind of, he missed some time, right? Just in the past couple of games, and just coming back into the lineup, it didn't look like he, really skipped a beat or anything like that. So I'm still, I guess I don't want to say bullish, but I don't think his stock is really diminished either. This is on the other guys on the team right now. They need other players. They need Olofsson. They need Tyson Jost. Maybe some of that depth that you talk about where you feel it might be lacking organizationally. They need people to step up and make the Sabres send Benson down if he's not popping. And to your point, that hasn't happened yet. I know Yuri Kulik has gotten off to a nice start, 4 goals, 6 points. Isak Rosén, his line mate, 2 goals, 4 assists for 6 points. Those guys are leading the team. But like right now, if they had to call a forward up, probably not calling up one of those two. It's probably Byro, maybe Rusek, could be. Yeah, I wouldn't call it Brett Murray yet, but but with the Kulik and Rosén thing, they're kind of like the second line right now, and they're playing great. They're showing year-over-year growth, but they still haven't seen a lot of those situations that you feel a lot of young players need to go through on the farm before really being ready for NHL time, like full throttle NHL time. Could they come up, play a game or two, Band-Aid, plug some minutes? Yeah, probably. But, in terms of being fully cooked, nowhere near yet. I'm talking about being out on the ice late in the game when it really matters, whether you're protecting a 1-goal lead, taking defensive zone starts. I talked about this a little bit on the podcast today when I was trying to figure out where they were going to put Matthew Savoy in the lineup on Wednesday when the Amerks play Charlotte. And it looks like Savoy, by the way, is going to play with Kulik and Rosén. Could be a pretty fun line. But, to take it back to Benson, I'm not really, I'm glad that they kind of toned it back a little bit, got the win. You got to get the rest of the team going because then it's less about Benson. You know what I mean? Like in the first couple of games of the year, it was Middlestat, then Cousins got going, right? Benson was there. Greenway, a guy that I talked about a lot in preseason, saying, I know what he's supposed to do as a player, and I was a hard time seeing where he fit. He fits everywhere now. Are you agreeing with me that Greenway has been like one of those connector pieces? Like we talked about Benson a lot, right? Put him on any line, he's going to get him going in preseason, and that really was the case. I feel like Greenway's kind of that guy right now.
Greenway's been fantastic. I'd say he's been one of their three or four best forward, probably a top 3 forward on the team, maybe top 2 on the team at times. Great penalty killer. You're seeing him really engaged physically that you didn't see, I think, when he came over from Minnesota because he was still dealing with the effects of his injury and the shoulder. He's come out of the gates really strong, and he's what I like about Jordan Greenway and why I like the idea of the trade when it happened was that if you can get him playing at the capacity, of what he's physically capable of, you're talking about a much different style of player than any other player, I think, in the entire forward group. And that they needed some variety to have some flexibility in their lines to move things around. That Benson Middlestat Greenway line was really good to start. And then you put Greenway with Cousins and Thompson, and that looks pretty great. So, like you said, you can move him around with these skill players, these high-end skill players, and he fits right in. He scored a really pretty goal early in the year. He's showing some of that talent, but also to just be that reliable guy on the penalty kill late in the game against Ottawa. He's scrambling around on the ice, breaking up a play. Thompson, pickpockets the Ottawa player at the point and flips it down the ice for the empty net goal. But Greenway, scrambling around kind of made that, started that chaos a little bit for Ottawa. The penalty kill is completely, I mean, it's only 7 games, but it seems like it might be fixed. And I think Greenway's a big part of that. I think Eric Johnson and Connor Clifton have contributed to calming that down. And so, yes, Greenway has been a real connector for the forward group. And I think the other big bright spot, and probably why I say that Greenway has not been their best forward, is because I think Casey Middlestat has been their best forward.
Dude,
And
Middlestat's been nails, man.
he
was great again tonight, by the way. I thought
so 2 of the goals I wrote down that he made the plays. He had the turnover in the defensive zone that started the 2-on-1 with Tuch and Skinner.
great
And then
stick.
on the other Skinner goal, he picked
The
off
bad
the
angle
pass.
goal.
Yep, he picked off the pass and got the puck to the net, the initial puck to the net. And then I think Tuch put a second shot, and then Skinner got, his. And so Middlestat ended up with an assist there as well. You go back to February 1, I wrote this after the Islander game because he had a couple assists there. As of that post game after the Islander game, if you went back to February 1, he led the team in assists from that point till now and led the team, tied for the team lead in points. He was tied with Jeff Skinner, so I think Skinner might be ahead of him now because he's keeps scoring and High School Musical in his way through the early part of the schedule here. But Casey Middlestat, for guys that I would say there were pretty big questions about, maybe not as many with Casey Middlestat, different types of questions, but entering the final year of his deal, coming off a career year, would he be able to take another step to really make that decision, an easy one for the Sabres to really want to bring him back? And then you have Greenway coming on the deadline, maybe wasn't quite himself to finish the year. People are wondering, like we talked about, like, where does this guy fit in? What's he going to be? What's he going to look like? Well, right now, I think on the aggregate of 7 games, those are your 2 best forwards. And that's great because once Tage Thompson and Alex Tuch, and okay, Skinner is in that mix too, but I'm just thinking 200-foot all over the ice game. I've liked Middlestat and Greenway consistently. Skinner's doing what Jeff Skinner does, but that's kind of my point is if you have Middlestat and Greenway going, once Tage Thompson and Alex Tuch get going, those guys are real dangerous. Jeff Skinner's already scoring goals. All of a sudden it's like, okay, and Dylan Cousins, by the way, who's right up there as well, playing some pretty good hockey the last few games. And it's like you're starting to see what the top 6 could look like. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, they have layers to the attack, and they're going to be tough to match up. I think if these guys keep playing and Middlestat can, keep this pace, we're really, to your point, he's picked up where he left off late in last season. No, so it's really fun to watch. So now, to your point, with Skinner already going and Thompson seemingly getting going, even when he wasn't scoring, he had a couple games where he was playing, pucks just weren't going in for him.
He had 10
Um,
shots on night, 10 shots on net in one game, a few
yeah,
games ago. So it was like, yeah, I think this guy's gonna. It was kind of like last year at the start of the year where it was like his expected goals were through the roof and he wasn't scoring. So he's going. Tuch was not going until this game against the Senators. So now they both feel like they're starting to find their groove.
and it's only one game, right? Let's see if they can keep it going, but maybe they can break off a couple wins. I think, for all the doom and gloom that was going on in this town, I mean, the Sabres are 3-4 right now. And I think partially, keep in mind, I think a lot of people were just feeling really bad about the Sabres because of the expectations, but also because of the Bills.
I was going to
Let's
say,
not let's not ignore let's not ignore all that shit that's going on with the Bills right now.
well, they
But
really
I think
missed the window, didn't they? Like, I'm sitting here thinking the Bills are falling apart. Everybody's mad at the Bills. This is a real window for the Sabres. 5 home games in the first
yeah,
6.
they
This is
blew it,
your
man.
this is your chance to like make this a hockey town again. And meanwhile, they've got a lot of empty seats, a lot of lackluster performances, and kind of they didn't come out of the gates roaring and really, you know, grab the fan base by the shirt collar and say, "Come on, we're doing this thing." But it doesn't change, I don't think, the long-term outlook of the season. It was just a little bit of a missed opportunity to really to generate some excitement, for the season. But the Bills have done them a favor here. I think there's people taking a peek over at the hockey team to see if maybe they can derive some satisfaction, some hope out of the group because it's pretty bleak in Orchard Park.
It's not looking too good over there right now for sure. So we covered a lot of ground already here. We've talked about the forwards, we talked about the goaltending a little bit, and here we are. I just did the math. We're 8.5% of the way through the schedule. Where are you at with the defenseman right now? Dahlin's kind of doing his Dahlin stuff. 6-game point streak right now. I thought Samuelson's been excellent. I love it. I wrote down a note tonight just when I was jotting some things down, just about his reach and the plays that he makes, defending net rushes, shoveling pucks on the boards, just breaking up plays, using that reach. And it just goes to show you why big defensemen are so important. Samuelson constantly makes plays that smaller defensemen, those maybe mobile puck mover, offensive minded defensemen, guys can't make. And he constantly just reminds you the importance of the length and just how big, of a component that is in the blue line. But I thought he's been excellent the past couple of games with the pairs and how they're constructed, right? Forward combinations that I would have rolled out, and they were all wrong, by the way. But he's like, would you change the D up? And I was like, no, man, like we're just talking about, mixing up the forwards. Like you can't move every deck chair around. And I kind of like having Samuelson up there with Dahlin right now. He can play the minutes. I think he had the most ice time tonight, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Dahlin had 21-17 tonight in the win in Ottawa. Samuelson 22-35. I just asked you a question and then talked for 5 minutes. I'm gonna go back to the question that I asked you. Where are you at with the pairs through 7 games? And do you see any changes necessary or things that you would try?
I feel like the defense has been, we'll have to see after Frozen Frenzy today how the advanced numbers look compared to the league. My second Frozen Frenzy mention here. As you can see, I'm wrapped up in it.
You love it.
And I only watched 1 game tonight, so I didn't really take advantage. But I actually don't like it because then I, don't get any games to watch on a Sabres night off. But the defense has not been the Sabres' biggest problem this season. Hasn't really even been I don't know if I would classify it as a problem consistently. I think consistency overall as a team has been their biggest issue. Seems like they're playing whack-a-mole with different problems, right? The offense being the most consistent one, but one night it's they can't get to the net, one night it's defensive zone coverage, or one night it's rebound control from the goalies, but that's early season hockey. As far as how these guys are playing, I'm with you on Dahlin and Samuelson. I wasn't super shocked to see Granato go back to that because it was comfortable, and it was when those two are together, it's perfect. There's a great, when you have a player like Dahlin who has been really dominant at times this season defensively and just quietly racking up points too. He's, I think, what has he got? Six or seven here at this point. Hasn't scored, but he's racking up points, but he's shutting plays down defensively. And he's got a guy like Samuelsson who understands him, can read off of him very well. The one thing with Clifton, Connor Clifton I misread this situation in the summer. I thought Connor Clifton is going to be a Buffalo Sabres fan favorite from the jump. And I still think he will be a fan favorite.
I think he will be when he gets a little deeper here into the season.
It feels like he has been an early target, at least among the Sabres fans who are online. I think.
Well, people are pissed that they didn't go out and make these big splashy moves. That's just kind of happens often,
target, right? But he's been the victim of some bad puck luck early in the season for sure. He's had some moments, I'm sure he wants back, but I remain pretty optimistic about what he can bring to this team. And one thing I will say about him is that, and the same goes for Erik Johnson, who I think has been good and been really, really important in the room.
Yeah.
Like when we talked about how would they handle the pressure, they probably needed Erik Johnson more than we realized when they signed him for that reason. He's also playing well on the ice. He's settled down the penalty kill. But the Connor Clifton point I want to make, and it sort of applies to Erik Johnson, when you come from a place and playing a style of hockey where there's structure and you're playing the game a certain way, especially as a defenseman, and you get plucked into a team that has been described by multiple visiting players, at least last year, and they're trying to change this, but multiple visiting players flat out said, yeah, they don't really have a lot of structure. They just kind of go, like Patrick Kane mentioned that. There's not a lot of structure. They're really freewheeling. And that is a lot different than what Connor Clifton grew up with in the NHL. And he mentioned that him and Erik Johnson are kind of trying to be the ones who help bring a little bit of that, as obviously Don Granato and the coaches are trying to implement a little bit more defensive structure. But you're talking about a team that doesn't have a lot of that, solidified in place, built up, and forwards who are now figuring that out more. Started to a little bit at the end of the year, but that's such a big piece of how these guys are playing as well. So if you're Connor Clifton and you're used to name a Bruins forward, being there, back checking, filling his spot, being in the right place, picking up the right guy, and then you don't have that, and you're going to look at times like it's your fault that a goal was scored, but you might have been thinking, well, geez, and he's never going to sit there and say it. He's never going to, but that's why I just feel like the guy deserves some time to settle in, to figure it out, to let everybody else figure it out around him. And I think that's why I liked him moving away from Dahlin, because it was like, okay, let's not mess with what worked with Dahlin. He would have won the Norris potential if he stayed healthy last year. And who knows if Matthias Samuelsson was healthy all year and they got to play together for 82 games. And Connor Clifton getting used to playing within the Sabres, forming structure is a thing, but playing with Rasmus Dahlin is different. And Samuelsson's really good at it. So he gets to play with Erik Johnson, and that kind of works out. And then you got the old Owen Power Yoki Haru pair that we can get into, but if you've got a Clifton thought that you want to tack on there,
not really. I'm glad you brought up structure, I guess. The only things that I'll mention about what you just talked about with Clifton and Johnson is massive, and he is so strong, and just watching him in that bottom pair role, use his body, and he's so strong. He pins very big players against the wall. It's refreshing to see. He just looks so calm and poised doing it. He just takes guys out, cancels out his man. It's such a simple thing, but it's so noticeable. And I just like seeing him from seeing that from him. On the point of structure, so glad you brought that up. It reminds me that's what good organizations have. An example of that in the area, my world with Noah Osland. That's the first thing he mentioned when he moved from Djurgården in the second division up to Vecchia this year. Is Vecchia is like the class, one of the top clubs in all of European professional hockey. And he's like, there's so much structure here, and it's easy to play because everyone's good and they are always where they're supposed to be. And it's the importance of having structure, but every good organization has it on and off the ice, by the way. So I'm glad you mentioned that. But that's all I had on Jokiharju before I volley it back to you. I thought he had a good game tonight. It was one that I really watched him more closely than I have in the previous games because I was watching Power. I didn't think Power had the hottest game on Monday against Montreal. So I thought that pair together kind of performed and functioned better tonight. Agree or disagree on both of those points on Jokiharju and the pair?
Yeah, relative to expectations, Power has probably been, 7 games. You don't want to use like the wrong word, but relative to expectations, his performance has left me wanting a little bit more of the 6. Because you kind of know what you're getting in Jokiharju, and we mentioned some of the context around Erik Johnson and Connor Clifton, and the other 2 guys have been great. And Power hasn't found that quite yet. And continuity is not an issue there, right? He's playing with the guy that he's pretty comfortable with or has played with a lot anyways. I don't know. They're not always the most comfortable together, but I do think that against Ottawa, they were both better. And Jokiharju made a great play on a 2-on-1 to break things up. That just a confidence that I wonder we'll probably see this play out over the course of the season. And as Clifton and Johnson get more comfortable, but you wonder if being around those guys is going to really bring out a little bit more confidence in Jokiharju. I don't think confidence was lacking for Power at any point last year. Power and Dahlin have their own kind of, offensive flair and swagger about them when they're going. Matthias Samuelsson has found his role and his place in the NHL, and he's very comfortable in it. Jokiharju, I feel like, has still been trying to figure out, like, who am I in the NHL, right? He has some offensive ability, but he also plays a rough game at times in terms of blocking shots and stuff like that. He's not a heavy hitter, but you wonder if being around Erik Johnson and Connor Clifton, he can start to just see tangible examples of how to do that, how to play that game that can complement these other high-end skilled defensemen in the lineup. So I've seen flashes of it. The number one thing with Jokiharju has always been consistency and how he handles the ups and downs and staying healthy was the big thing last year. So all in all, though, it's been a pretty steady ride for the top 6 where I feel it's not a major problem for them. Like, I don't think defensive structure and team defense maybe has occasionally been an issue, but I'm not overly concerned with any one individual in the defensive depth chart right now.
No, me neither, honestly. That's why, that was my answer to Marty today. It was just like, just like let him chill. It's fine. If it ain't broke, don't fix it back there. To your points, that's the biggest problem. On the Power thing, in his draft year, there was comparisons to, Victor Hedman, right? And we have to all remember that it took Victor Hedman quite a while to be Victor Hedman in the NHL. And until Owen Power is Victor Hedman, there's going to be games like some of the performances that he's had in the first 6. And I think we just need to be mindful of that. I don't think it's going to take him as long as it took Victor Hedman to become Victor Hedman, but I think there's going to be games and learning experiences along the way because he's still a very young player. Regardless of the big contract that he just signed just a couple weeks ago. We should probably, Matthew, check out the comments here. As always, I've been doing a poor job looking at that tab. have you been cruising through? Is there anything you want to
I've
pull
had
out here?
this up, and one guy that we haven't mentioned that Brian Cummings mentioned here that I think is worth talking about, and would probably lead us in some other things to really be able to tie the whole thing together. But JJ Peterka, as we were talking about the forward lines and Greenway really finding his spot in Middlestat, Brian mentioned that, that kind of leaves Peterka with seeds and stems for line mates, and we had hopes for him after the World Championships.
Is that a weed reference, Brian Cummings?
I think it is.
That's a weed reference.
Which, we're on the After Dark version here, so
yeah, that's not illegal. That's not illegal.
Right. It's welcome on this show, but I think it's a fair point. Is that it's where when you don't have Jack Quinn, you're feeling that, right? You're feeling the absence of Jack Quinn, and you could balance it out more by, pushing Dylan Cousins to center. But we saw that didn't really work. Not that Dylan Cousins at center doesn't work, but that the Dylan Cousins, Peterka, and either Olofsson or Krebs, that's not really getting the most out of Dylan Cousins either. So Peterka has shown signs of that offense from the World Championships early in the season. I still just want him to shoot the puck with more conviction. And, I just want him to, there's multiple times where it's like, you don't want to be that guy, right? That when we're sitting in the press box, I can always hear the people in the 300s screaming, shoot it. But sometimes with JJ Peterka, it's warranted. Like you want him to get rid of the puck. And when he had that goal, I forget which game it was where the puck came out. I think it was the Islander game where the puck just came off his stick like in a split second, and he had this incredible release. And it's like, yeah, that's why you just need to get rid of it, get it on net. And he's still figuring that out. And I think there's a lot of potential there. But I think to Brian's point, it might be hard to see that potential as the forward group is currently constructed, because we talk so as good as an offensive team as they are, and as loaded as they are organizationally at forward through the prospect ranks, there's still something that's not quite fitting all together with that, whether it's Krebs and where do you put him, center or wing, whether it's who plays with Peterka, in spurts, all these guys have had some good moments, but I think it's, they're buying time for their other high-end guys to come up and develop, whether it's Ostland or Savoy or Kulik or Roseanne, they're buying time to figure out who those guys are and what they're going to be. And then you've got Jack Quinn hurt, so it doesn't really help matters either. But it's been tough to see for Peterka, because you would like to, in a different scenario, see him play with more talented line mates on a more consistent basis. They've gotten a decent response from Victor Olofsson the last couple games, which I will mention because he's, he earned his healthy scratch early in the year, no doubt. He played his way on into the press box, but they've gotten a little bit more out of him since he's come back. You just wonder if how the bottom six is constructed is going to hold up throughout the course of the season without another addition to the group.
Yeah, I didn't dislike Olofsson out there with Gergensons and Okposo tonight.
It was
That's
an
a good
interesting
point.
move.
Yeah,
It was an interesting move. I was like, okay, that's a different one. He got to the net for, I think it was Saturday, his first game back in the lineup. He had a bunch of shots on net against the Canadiens. So it was like, all right, this guy hasn't played his way out. So I liked that Granato kept him in. And yeah, it was interesting to see him with Gergensons Okposo, much different flavor than we're used to, with his line mates.
Were you expecting him in the lineup in Ottawa, or were you thinking that they were going to put Jost back in?
I wasn't quite sure what it felt like. They were leaning towards Benson getting back in the lineup, and I kind of just figured they'd go back to what was working and bump Olofsson out. But that was the thing. Olofsson, like I said, I felt like in the two games he had responded well. And when I asked Don Granato, one of the days at practice, I don't know, whenever I asked him about how he felt like Olofsson responded, he felt, he was pleased. He was like, and he doesn't miss chances to point out the shortcomings with Olofsson. He's not just always positive, about what he's doing, but he felt like the objectives they laid out, he was doing some of those. And so as a coach, I understand why you keep him in, because it's like, okay, he's doing some of the things we're asking. We still may not believe that long term this is a solution, but he is at least, taking correction, getting to the net, engaging a little bit more along the walls. I don't know if he's going to sustain that. I have my doubts, but I understand keeping him in and trying him with two guys. It's like, okay, we'll let this guy play a little bit more of his game and let Okposo and Gergensons play that, direct, do the dirty work and see if it, results in anything. But they also like Jost. Jost has popped in and in spurts been pretty good. It's just like you'd love to see some sustained something from the third and fourth lines, some consistency and some identity start to form, because it's really been a guessing game at times.
It's going to be, it's tricky. Have you heard anything, by the way, on Quinn? It's early. It's October 24th. I think we're probably, at least I would say 6 weeks before maybe getting an answer to that question. But have you heard anything on how his recovery is doing from the surgery that he had?
He started very, very lightly skating. It sounds like just like putting skates on.
Okay.
He was walking around the press box with no noticeable limp or nothing on, the Achilles. So there's that.
He didn't have skates with skate guards on?
No, that would have been, no mouth guard, no helmet in the press box. But he is still a ways off. Like you said, Don Granato said it's still, this is sort of just like one small step in his recovery. It's going to be another big question, is like, when he is ready, what does ready look like? How long before you actually get Jack Quinn that you got at the end of last year? Because you're not talking about Alex Tuch, who it's like, okay, he's going to come back and he's Alex Tuch, right? So eventually he's going to look like Alex Tuch. This is a player who looked at times last year like he was going to be your next big offensive threat, but I think had not yet established that he was going to be that consistent night in, night out offensive threat the way you see some of these other players. So when you're still in that development window and you have an injury like this, it complicates it.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I think I'm eager to see, because I mean, a lot of the things that we're talking about what's ailing the team right now, I think gets solved when they get Quinn back, obviously. Just going through some of these other comments, there seems to be a theme, some concerns about UPL's game tonight, maybe his quickness post to post. That's kind of, I think that there's times when I do look at UPL and I still wonder if he moves like an NHL goalie, finger quotes. Okay. So I get that from some of the commenters for sure. In the meantime, he stopped the puck and was happy to see him, just for him as a human being, get a win under his belt in his first start. Definitely a lot of support in the chat for Greenway and Middlestad. A lot of comments about just the great starts that they're having to the season, about Greenway having a good game tonight. Bob R writes, Bills who? I hear you, Bob R. I guess we'll find out. They play Thursday, right?
Yeah, quick turnaround for them. Maybe just like the Sabres, it's good. They get the quick turnaround and get a home game.
I feel like Hairbras writes, I feel like the Sabres are missing a glue guy that rounds out the forward group. Yeah.
I wonder what they're going to do, because you can't, we've talked about Patrick Kane, so there's that option if they decide to go that route.
No, I love it. Yeah. I'll say it one more time. Yeah.
I think I like it more now, even, because it's like, okay, if Benson goes back to junior, then maybe you have, I don't know, you put Benson or you put Kane with a player like Tage Thompson, or I don't know. There's a lot of things you could do. All of a sudden you have a different level of flexibility within your forward ranks. But I think, what the commenter brings up
also makes sense is you got to add the right type of player. You got to add the right contract, right? So that you're not blocking guys in the system and all that. But they do have flexibility beyond this year because Gergensons and Okposo are on 1-year deals. Jost is on a 1-year deal. I believe it's late, so don't quote me on it. But I believe he's on just a 1-year
Yeah,
deal.
I think it was
So it's
one.
like you have the freedom to clear roster spots. Olofsson's in the final year of his contract. So you can bring in somebody who's beyond just this season. And I think that's something that Kevin Adams has to seriously consider. I know a lot of the attention in Western New York right now is that Brandon Beane needs to make a trade for the football team. But I think Kevin Adams needs to be surveying his options here and preparing for this is an interesting juggle that Kevin Adams has because of everything that we've mentioned. Is Zack Benson going to play beyond 9 games? Yes or no? We'll see. Is he going to be around all year? Can Matt Savoy play in the NHL this year? Yes or no? They still have to find that out. If not, can Jack Quinn come back and be Jack Quinn, and how soon can he do it? Those are 3 pretty big questions for your forward group beyond just, will Victor Olofsson get it figured out? You know, can JJ Peterka take another step? These other individual sort of questions for each guy, micro questions, because then you have to look big picture and say, if I'm Kevin Adams, what can I do as a general manager to give this forward group a boost? And if it's not Patrick Kane, is there an Eric Johnson type that you can add to your forward group?
It's got to be a guy, yep, like an older player, veteran presence, potentially with a cup on his resume. That's part of the appeal with Patrick Kane. There's a question in the comment about Kane, not to spend a lot of time on Kane because I know, it'll go off the rails, but does he have much left in the tank? I think he's got enough left in the tank to certainly contribute to the Sabres this season, pending, if the reports of how his rehabilitation's been going are true. I think he's got something in the tank, especially in the role that they would rely on him and the value that he would have with the been there, done that factor, to your point. But no, going back to that glue guy, I think it all kind of blends together. That playoff experience, I think we're looking at a Sabres team right now, the beginning of the season. It's a different, they're having trouble with the pressure of expectations, maybe a little bit, so we'll see what happens if they can break off a couple wins. If not, then all the more reason that they got to get someone with some experience that can help guide them, add to that structure that you talk about, going back to your Clifton comment. I think there's so many important things to be gained by adding some experience to the locker room now. And I get the point of fans that were upset when they didn't make that big splash, to kind of bring it full circle to some other comments that we made earlier in the show. A couple other comments here. Ooh, there's one I can take. Wahlberg looks like a player too. Wahlberg does look like a pretty nice player. So for those that aren't aware, Anton Wahlberg, 2nd round pick in 2023, currently playing as an 18-year-old on Malmo's second line. He's the second leading junior age scorer right now in the Swedish Hockey League, 6 points through 10 games. You could tell I did a podcast this morning, right? Because like all the stats are just like right stuck on my brain. But more importantly, he's got power forward potential. He's really smart, and he does look like a player. And I think that we will see him at the World Junior Championship for Sweden. He's got a lot of competition there, Hairbras. But I liked your comment there, and that's one I'll gladly take. I'll talk about the prospects. You can wake me up at 4 a.m, ask me a question, and I'll be happy to answer about prospects.
Big guy too, like a big. You talk about adding a different flavor to your organizational depth chart. That's what I really liked about that pick.
6'3.5", 200 pounds. He turned 18 on the 4th of July when he was here for development camp. He's just a baby still, man. And kind of like, by the way, we're going back to Owen Power. We make that Hedman thing. Owen Power is still looks young. Like, have we even thought about what he's going to look like in 4 or 5 years?
It's
how
an
thick
interesting
and just
thought.
rock solid he's going to be. Because it just dawned on me, like, Power is like this. We haven't even seen what Power is going to like be physically.
He's huge.
Wahlberg is going to be a monster, to your point. Yeah.
Owen Power, the biggest thing missing from his game right now is a little bit of meanness and a little bit of
A little bit of that, what you talked about with Eric Johnson, right? Just being able to just physically impose your will on opponents. And it's not even just talking about big hits or anything. It's just like being mean in front of the net and being, just a nasty presence. And some of that
stiff arm into the boards.
right. Yeah,
like,
it doesn't have to be a, highlight reel hit, but some of that has to happen between the ears, right? Like there's a lot of that, but that happens quicker when your body starts to fill out and you realize like, yeah, I can. I actually noticed it too with his shot last year where I felt like you can shoot the puck harder than this, man. Like I know you can shoot the puck harder than this. And there was just not the conviction with the shot all the time. And so I'm interested, like you saw Dahlin, I felt like last year, and I didn't watch him as closely in his really young years, but like last year he would just start letting it rip. And you're like, man, this guy can shoot. And you look at Owen Power and you think, you should be able to shoot it as hard as Dahlin. And I think you probably can when you really let it rip, but he was picking his spots, almost like, trying to make sure it got on net. And so it's just these little things that I feel like when he develops the confidence and the grown man strength, they'll start to come out a little bit more.
Oh, I think I lost you a little bit there, Matthew, but I think what you're about to say, though, I think there's a point in every big physical specimen's career where they figure out how big and strong they are. And I think we haven't seen that yet with Power. You broke up a little bit there at the end of your sentence, but I think you were kind of going along those lines.
Yeah, I pretty much had wrapped there where I thought, just once he gets there, you assume he will get there. There's no reason to think he won't get there, but it's just a matter of once the body he really develops like that grown man strength, it's going to be what you just said is going to click so much faster because it's going to be like, wow, it's going to be pretty hard for him to ignore how strong he is if he continues to physically develop the way he is, because he's going to be like, man, yeah, I am a lot stronger than these guys, or I can rip this puck, or I can, do this. And he's got a finesse element to his game that's fine. It's part of what makes him, really a smooth offensive play driver. But the other part, if he can get that, that's when you're going to have a potential value at $8.3 million.
Tying up a loose end from one of your earlier comments or questions, Tyson Jost is on a 1-year, $2 million deal. It is late, so I get it. You get a free pass on that one. Couple other comments, I think, here, questions before we wrap it up. If you're cool with that, Matthew, does Quinn start off in Rochester for conditioning? Possible.
Probably,
Yeah,
right?
probably. I mean, we've seen.
Games.
Yeah, I think that's a good call out, Bob R, on that. And McKay seemed to agree with Bob, saying, yep, that's definitely to get him gamed up. I like that. What position's Wahlberg been playing? A little bit of right wing, a little bit of left wing, but recently second line right wing. Von Barnekow, been talking a lot about, and I'll just briefly address Teddy Usick's question here about Von Barnekow. Right now, he's second in the SHL, scoring for under 22-year-olds. William Von Barnekow is a breakout prospect this year, one of the better storylines that's emerging very early, playing on the top line. He's a teammate of Wahlberg with Malmo. He was a Sabres 6th-round pick in 2021. Big kid, 6'4", had a shoulder injury last year, came back, gained 11 pounds. He's stronger, faster, he looks like a player. But I do think, to your question, Teddy, do I see him more as a bottom 6 role? I think that's his North American projection, even though he's playing on the top line in Sweden right now, and he's showing some skill. His projection to me is still two-way shutdown guy and opportunistic offensive producer. And then Bob has a comment here. I should try to read these before I read them out loud, but the experience in Dahlin's first few seasons coupled with Johnson should help Power in his development. Yeah, totally. I think that's Dahlin. That's just part of the emergence, I think, that we're going to see, Matthew, from Rasmus Dahlin becoming that next wave of leader once Kyle Okposo is ready to relinquish the C that's currently stitched onto his jersey.
Yeah, Dahlin is he's the captain in waiting, it feels like. And
his path in particular, I think, can be of real value to a lot of guys, but specifically Power, because is the exact path as a number one pick, but even different in that it's like any struggles Power feels like he's going through, Dahlin can be like, listen, man, like,
Yeah.
let me tell you about this coach I had. Let me tell you about what things were like before you got here. Like, it's going to be okay. So, yeah, I think that helps. And, that's where Clifton and Johnson, I really liked both of those signings. And maybe neither one becomes a top 4 guy. Maybe they do. I don't know. But at the very least, you got 2 guys, different paths to the NHL, but around winning programs, around, good defensive teams, know what it looks like. And it's very clear to me that matters. It almost feels like it matters in hockey as much as any sport. And it was something that I think can occasionally be overrated in other sports, but almost underappreciated in hockey because of the long nature of the season. And, it's hard to just get by on your skill and your talent all the time in hockey throughout the course of an 82 game season. And you see a lot of really talented teams not figure it out at the right time of year. And the guys that have done that and been around that, I feel like those guys, especially for this particular hockey team, were desperately needed. They were, completely devoid of that. They had nobody on the team that had won a Stanley Cup. And I just don't think you're going to get where you're trying to go without somebody that's been there showing you the way.
Right on the money again, Matthew Fairburn. I think that's a good thought to end this late night edition of the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show. You like that name? Pretty simple name for a show.
Unless our wonderful commenters here come up with something more clever, I feel like,
Seeds and Stems. The Seeds and Stems show.
That might be a contender. It's kind of like, keeping it simple. When in doubt, keeping it simple. Kind of like the Sabres need to do, right? Like, when in doubt, we're just keeping it simple. We're getting pucks to the net. We're getting bodies in front of the net, and we're just going with the simple, searchable name here to start.
Well, I love it. It was great chatting with you, Matthew. I think that captaincy question, we'll talk about that down the road too. I agree, and I think there's another name in the hopper that maybe we're just kind of waiting for this player to just needs a little more time. I think he could also be part of that leadership core. Maybe not take a run at Where in the Sea, but I think we see another emerging leader on this team in the forward ranks. And I look forward to discussing that with you on a future edition of this show. We've gone over an hour tonight. Again, Sabres get a big win on Tuesday here, the 24th of October, 6'6". I almost said 6'4". I'm still talking about Von Barnekow, 6'4" in Ottawa. They'll be back in action Friday against New Jersey in New Jersey. I guess we'll find out who gets the net. A lot of storylines still open. Some that we thought we had answers to, we do not yet. And look forward to discussing all those storylines. And the next time we get together, Matthew, thanks for everyone in the chat for hopping on. If you're listening this audio podcast, by the way, that's actually worth a plug. This will be downloaded. If you search on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you check out your podcast, search Baker Fairburn Hockey Show. It's already appearing on there. The last one that we did, I think on the last night of preseason, Matthew, I think is the one, the last time we got together.
Owen
That's
Power
also loaded on there. That's right. Owen Power. That's right. Season Eve. That's right. So that's up. You can find this on Apple, Spotify, you name it. If there's a place that you're not finding it, let me know. I'll try to get it there. Otherwise, thanks again for hopping on, everyone. Thank you, Matthew. We'll do this again soon.